folks, how's it going? I'm just working on a little piece just now, which has been inspired by the whole Loki debate, where she was talking what she thought was off the record and seemed to suggest that she felt that there weren't enough Scottish people working at National Theatre Scotland, and this created a big hoo-ha. And anyway, my view on it was that I was speculating that maybe she was actually inferring a class representation issue as opposed to an issue around ethnicity, i.e. National Theatre Scotland and theatre generally, including culture, political culture, journalism, the arts. Everything is kind of seen through a middle class lens. And so my article is about that. Few people have written pieces in response to some of the stuff that happened, as interesting as they are, and the amount of context that they give in terms of specific examples of theatre. I think they all miss the main point, which is the underpinning a lack of authentic representations of working class culture. Underpinning all of that is a social mobility issue. So social mobility, i.e. how easy is it for someone who comes from poverty to get out of that poverty? In this society, people talk a lot about social mobility, but there's no, it's a big problem, right? It's a big problem. I'm 31. I'm so socially mobile that the other day I was in court and I got 130 hours community payback order, and by the end of the day I was on TV talking about comments made by the Scottish Poet Laureate. So I have a pure schism life, which basically means my margin for error is so small that if I, like I did in January, get so bent out of shape that I end up picking up a drink, then my life can quickly unravel because all the safety nets, well, there are no safety nets really. So that's just my personal sort of example of social mobility, right? It affects everybody in different ways. Now, in terms of theatre, culture and all of that sort of stuff, then the first thing, the problem that we have is there aren't enough people from working class backgrounds working in those areas. Now, why is that? So, basically, when you come from a working class background, then the way that your life, the psychosocial impact of your upbringing has a fundamental effect on not just economic opportunities and educational opportunities, but also your self-image and your self-esteem. So I compare it very much to, I always sort of see myself as like a tractor at a red light, right? A really well put together tractor that is capable of doing lots of great things. But stuck at a red light, there are wee mopeds, wee guys with leather jackets and shiny faces just whizzing by me on the bus lane every year, sometimes even just a few might leapfrog, right? And the reason that they whiz by is because instilled within them, because they come from a middle class background, instilled within them is a sense of self-confidence and self-belief coupled with emotional stability. So where I look at into society and feel anxiety, they look at into society and they see a society that confirms for them what they already think. They look on TV and they see representations of where they come from. They read the papers and they see their views and opinions reinforced. They go to college and they go to university, or sometimes straight to university, and constantly, I'm not saying that their lives are easy, but they have a very kind of traditional path through, right? I have to work twice as hard just to keep up, you know what I mean, with that sort of stuff, and I'm sure people out there who come from that kind of background like me will know what I mean. So that's the social mobility aspect. So it's not just about are the jobs available, are the opportunities available. It's that there are different barriers for people coming from different backgrounds. But if you're not from that background, then the barriers are almost imperceptible to you. And this is the exact same sort of stuff that, you know, that you hear feminists talking about, ethnic minorities talking about. The difference between all of those other aspects and class is that class permeates everything. So if you actually set up a society where there's quotas for females to be involved, and quotas for black people to be involved, and quotas for all sorts of other minority groups or whatever to be involved, what you'll find is it'll be middle class females that will get involved. It'll be middle class black people that will get involved. So in a way, you know, as the issue of gender starts to really, like, you know, get the traction in the wider societal discussion that it deserves, at the same time, there are issues around how class manifests in these things, because all genders, sexualities, races, everything, if you come from the working class background in any of these, then it's just the same, right? Anyway, so there's that issue, right? Social mobility. Then there is the fact that the actual arts organisations themselves are predominantly self-selecting, because they are made up of people who come from middle class backgrounds, and naturally they will employ people from those backgrounds, and that means that the culmination of all of these institutions, cultural or otherwise, being predominantly made up of white, able-bodied, middle class people, is that they will have a collective view of society which is reflected in their output and their tastes. And so we see a culture and a society which demonstrates the issues that are pertinent to people of that class and that perspective, which is why we watch TV or you know, don't even go to theatre, which is why we watch TV and we're watching things and laughing at things that those people find shocking and vulgar, like Lemmy and Frankie Boyle, right? Now, and so then, even the things that we like, that we actually connect to, that we feel authentically represent us, they're looked down upon as vulgar or juvenile. But if you actually, like, if you come from a background like me, then you know fine well that you take something like Frankie Boyle, right? Then people who have the time to be shocked by Frankie Boyle clearly have a different threshold for shock. The reason why people from working class backgrounds find shocking things funny is because we have such a high threshold for shock, because living in poverty is shocking enough. You could just wake up one day and, you know, get a phone call, you know, somebody's dead, drug overdose, you know, somebody's been stabbed, somebody's been shot, you're dealing with your own cross addictions, your emotional turmoil is transferring onto all your family members, people are isolating in bedrooms, watching TVs where society is depicted to them in such a way as to blame them for not aspiring to what they see on TV. So you've got a news media that tells them they're scroungers, they're spongers, they shouldn't be spending all their money on benefits, and then you've got an advertising industry which has just as much money as a country, preying on their human frailty, so they spend money on things like sugar and sweeties and all these wee fleeting comforts, right? Now this might seem like a pure complicated fucking picture that I'm painting here, diving from one thing to the next, right? But I'm talking about the working class experience of society. And so, anyway, you get shocked at Frankie Boyle because, you know, you live in a sort of mild-mannered social sphere, right? Fair enough. If people, you also get, like, you know, people who will look at work that Lemmy does and they will say, Lemmy is making fun of working class people, right? First of all, yes, of course he is. Second of all, he can do that because he comes from a working class background, so he's accepted as a peer. Do you understand? But then that's an example of someone from a middle class background just inserting themselves into a conversation which they lack the cultural understanding to know how we communicate with each other. So you take characters that Lemmy does, right, like Dee Dee, like Jacqueline McCafferty, Falconhoof. What have they all got in common apart from the fact that they all seem to originate in Glasgow, right? They're all kind of, like, their existence is almost kind of futile in a way, right? When I watch these characters, apart from laughing at them, I feel a lot of sympathy for them and I relate to them. So Jacqueline McCafferty, what is her life about? Her life is about trying so hard to get better and better a situation and just not being able to emotionally hold it together. Just end up freaking out, dismantling all the progress that she's made and totally freaking out because somebody looks at her the wrong way and she's so insecure she thinks everybody is judging her all the time. A lot of people will watch that character and they will miss all that. They will just be looking the standard way the middle class society looks at working class people is just identifies and magnifies behaviour. So there's no exploration of pathos, there's no inquiry into what is the psychosocial makeup that creates these reactions. So then you've got something like Rab C. Nesbitt, which is part of almost the canon, the Scottish cultural canon, right? Now, some people might disagree with me, some people might know, people might think I'm reaching, but I do think there's something in it. When you watch Rab C. Nesbitt, then basically everything about him is disgusting. He's a selfish, loud, obtrusive, antisocial, alcoholic, absentee father, non-existent husband, except when he does his monologues, where he almost becomes this West End sophisticate character. He begins to make observations that are completely in contradiction to what his real characteristics are. And so his redemption comes in that. And so there's something interesting about that. You know what I mean? I don't know if that's intended by the writer. And I don't think that where the writer comes from in terms of class even matters. But there's something interesting in the fact that on his own private mind, he sees himself as a sort of Byers Road philosopher, and in this he becomes redeemable in the eyes of the audience. So these are just some of the things that I'm kind of going through, because I think, there's two components to culture. There's the commercial culture where artists work and produce work and that is disseminated and critiqued, but then there's public funded culture, and so organisations like National Theatre Scotland are given money and tasked to go into communities and engage disadvantaged people, enrich their lives through works of art and culture. So there's two different components to that, and I have a bit of experience of both. When it comes to the public funded stuff, everybody's doing their best, but the system as it is just now there's no incentive for people to tell the truth. Let me give you an example of this. A big arts organisation parachutes into a community, armed with £500,000 that they got from an EU fund that has a directive attached to it saying you need to use this money to regenerate disused land, right? So that's what it's for. Somebody in Brussels has decided that. So the arts company sees the money, they think we're running low on money, let's move into landscaping. So they get the money, they go into the community, say somewhere like South Ayrshire or something, right? And they start trying to recruit young people who don't have any education or employment experience, apart from school, which they all got excluded for. The arts company tries to engage them by employing artists based on their artistic skill set and not on their ability to engage with challenged groups in society. So what happens over time is these artists are getting paid over a 6-month period, and they don't have the skills to effectively engage this very specific group of young people who will be dealing with low self-esteem that will manifest as aggressive, challenging behaviour. So anyway, 4 months passes and the community garden's no further forward. The staff start turning on each other. The young people revolt if they even turn up at all. Then they begin to be compelled to come and incentivised to by being given money to come just to justify putting the project on in the first place. And then eventually what happens is, by the end, all of the staff on the project have to finish building the garden because the young people don't give a fuck anymore. But when the Lord Provost comes on the day where the project is celebrated in the community, no one talks about this. The project is reported in the paper as a success. The press goes out. In the public mind, everything went really well. In reality, it was a total waste of everybody's time, a total waste of resources. £500,000 could have went into so many other things. And so what you see is, in the evaluation, none of that stuff will come up because people are scared to say what really does and doesn't work because they don't want to lose funding. And so that's the problem with the top-down directives. The second aspect is the top-down directives are informed by a middle-class reading of society. And very much, you see this just now with the big drive to tackle sectarianism, where you see a lot of people from suburban areas or affluent areas tapping into funding pots to go and work in working class areas on subjects that middle class people have decided are important. If you go into working class communities, sectarianism isn't an issue. Why? Because it's a part of our daily lives. So we don't identify it as a problem. We communicate effectively across the barriers of religion, however that manifests. And while now and again there might be flare-ups here and there, and there is obviously some serious bigotry out there, at the same time, on the whole, things continue to improve. People in the East End of Glasgow are not walking around going, the big problem around here is sectarianism. The big problem for them is a socio-economic system which does not acknowledge them at all, apart from their ability to sell their labour at a low price for almost no opportunities to progress, right? So, I know that's a bit of a long blather. These are some of the things that I'm trying to go into, right? Because I feel like it's more than just theatre. I feel like it's more than just the arts. It's an expression of a wider apathy that is as a result of poverty and everything about it being managed. So it's a poverty industry which permeates all the sectors in the Scottish economy, the third sector, the creative industries, everything, journalism. Thousands and hundreds of thousands of middle class people employed to manage poverty, to manage how we think about poverty, to manage people in poverty, to manage dissenting voices hailing from working class backgrounds and writing it off as antisocial behaviour, aggression, firebrands, all of this stuff. And the thing is, I think everybody is actually well-meaning, but people lack the cultural understanding. Educated people, influential people, columnists, journalists, TV presenters. The difference with me is I can go in and mix with those people, but then I can leave and go and talk to somebody on the street. I can sit in a jail cell and then I can share a platform with whoever. It doesn't bother me because I have the cultural understanding and a cross-cultural ability. The problem is that doesn't get you any currency. You know, it doesn't get you anywhere. There's no opportunities out there for people who can talk both languages or both sides of the tracks. And so the question is, where does the power lie? How do you solve the problem? People who hail from these traditional middle class backgrounds, who benefit from the roles that they have in managing different aspects of poverty, whether it be cultural or socio-economic or whatever, they have to accept that they need to re-educate themselves on class, privilege, and how that manifests in the day-to-day experience of people who come from poorer backgrounds. That's what I feel needs to happen. Until then, we're just going to have a country where the majority of people are looking at their TV screens and they're like, you don't know what's going on for me, so fuck you, you know, so fuck you. And then the middle class person's like, Well, I went in and I tried to help and was greeted with attitudinal resistance. You're ungrateful, uncultured and uneducated, so fuck you. And there's just this standoff when really both sets want to mix, both sets want to help. The issue is the fact that the people who come from the middle class backgrounds, who are educated, need to accept there's limitations to their education and limitations to their understanding. And so they need to begin to develop a way to give working class people access to the resources that they benefit from without trying to manage them, without trying to manage what they say, without trying to manage how they act. Just be there and see it as shared learning. You're not passing down skills to working class people. Our culture is just as rich and just as sophisticated. It's just that in this post-imperial society, we're on this spectrum of the vulgar to the sublime, and somehow people don't think that there is sometimes a sublime element to the vulgarity, and they don't understand that everybody is not on a continuum where you begin stupid and slowly you adopt increasingly middle class values and perspectives on life in order to ascend. That doesn't need to happen. That's some ramble in it, man. Anyway, that's the banner. Peace.